Hey, it's Brett, and this is Brett and Some Books. Today we are continuing the mysteries of history, unraveling the truth from the myths of our past. This chapter is called The Dreyfuss Affair, The Origins of the Tour de France. In September 1894, a French spy embedded at the German embassy in Paris as a cleaner found in a wastepaper basket a handwritten note from an anonymous French army officer offering to sell Germans details of the new French artillery. Although roughly torn up, the note was easily reconstructed, and then, in the following month, all suspicion was focused on Alfred Dreyfuss, captain of the artillery, whose handwriting bore a passing similarity to that on the note. Dreyfuss was not a popular man. Despite his undoubtedly high intellect, he was standoffish and magnificently boring. Worse still, his family hailed from Alsace, which was part of Germany, and a hurriedly arranged court-martial, no evidence of substance was presented, and the graphologist refuting the handwriting to be that of Dreyfuss was virtually thrown out on his ear. The defendant was found guilty and packed off to Devil's Island, a penal colony off the coast of French Guiana. Fortunately for Dreyfuss, it was named for the treacherous currents in the shark-infested waters about its shores rather than anything diabolical that happened there. Although life on the other French prison islands was nothing short of hell, the political category of inmates of Devil's Island enjoyed comparative comfort. Measuring about 3/4 of a mile by less than 1/3 of a mile, and comprising about 30 acres, over half of which was quite uninhabitable, the island never held more than 13 politically sensitive prisoners at any one time. Each prisoner had their own hut, was allowed to grow vegetables, could send and receive mail, and was given regular medical checkups. But to the innocent captive, a prison of any kind is still a prison, and back in France, the Dreyfuss affair was turning ugly. With the political left and right so sharply divided by the affair in France, there were running battles in the boulevards and parks between the pro and anti-Dreyfussards. In 1899, both the car maker Comte de Dion and tire magnate Edouard Michelin were arrested at the Auteuil racetrack for starting a ruckus during which Émile Loubet, the president of France, was whacked over the head with a walking stick. Actually, Loubet had not been in power long, having succeeded Felix Faure, who, on the 16th of February 1899, had died in such highly unusual circumstances that many suspected he had become victim of a pro-Dreyfussard plot. Attended that day at the Elysee Palace by his young mistress, Marguerite Steinheil, he allegedly died of a stroke as she performed on him what is perhaps best described as the love that cannot speak its name. But with Faure, an acknowledged anti-Semite, and a man determined to keep Dreyfuss exactly where he was, it seemed strongly suspected that Steinhall, with links to the pro-Dreyfussard lobby, might have popped something into his drink to stimulate a heart attack, and then dropped his trousers to claim it was all due to his getting overexcited. In August 1896, Major Ferdinand Esterhazy, the real traitor who offered information to the Germans, was exposed after correspondence between him and Maximilian von Schwarzkoppen, the German military attaché in Paris, was discovered by Marie-Georges Picquart of the French Army's Intelligence Bureau. Instead of acting on this, the authorities packed Picquart off to obscure duties in Tunisia with orders to keep his mouth shut. He sent all his proof to Dreyfuss's lawyers, which sparked a new round of rioting, but the military still refused to backtrack. Determined not to have the verdict against Dreyfuss overturned, the French High Command held a court-martial behind locked doors to find Esterhazy innocent, and more rioting in the streets ensued. He was allowed to slip quietly away to England and settle in Hertfordshire's leafy Harpenden, where he whiled away his time writing anti-Semitic trash until his death in 1923. The only positive result of Esterhazy's exposure was that it escalated factional hostilities to such a degree that President Loubet offered Dreyfuss a pardon in 1899, this being a take-it-or-leave-it and stay on Devil's Island deal, which Dreyfuss grabbed with both hands. This left him a pardoned traitor instead of an innocent man. So little changed, and as those factional hostilities rumbled on, France's leading member of the literati, Émile Zola, would soon pay with his life for his support of Dreyfuss. Returning to his Paris apartment at 21 Rue du Bruxelles, after a break in the country with his wife in September 1902, the couple lit the bedroom fire before retiring for the night. By the morning he was dead, and Alexandrine barely alive, both overcome with carbon monoxide poisoning. The police conducted tests, relighting the fire and shutting caged rodents in the room, but all survived. It seemed that Zola's death was a tragic accident, but such findings did not sit well with everyone. Even the commissioner in charge of the case, Pierre Cornet, had his doubts, but he was ordered to close the case as accidental death, and if he wanted to hang on to his job and pension, to keep his mouth shut. But in 1928, Zola's killer made his deathbed confession. Chimney and roof maintenance contractor Henri Charles, come on, baby, Dreyfuss had, in the days before, Zola's well-publicized return to Paris, been working on the conjoined roofs of the apartment blocks along Rue du Bruxelles, and admitted to deliberately placing a mat over Zola's chimney the evening of the couple's return, and to have then removed it early the next morning so as not to arouse suspicions. At the time of Zola's death, Dreyfuss was a leading member of Paul Deroulède's League of Patriots, a sort of French national front, even serving as Deroulède's personal bodyguard. He was also remembered by others for having made such threats after reading Zola's famous J'accuse article, his open condemnation of the Dreyfuss cover-up. In the aftermath of Zola's death, accusations were rife in the media. The pro- and anti-Dreyfussard lobbies were at the time identified by the sporting papers they bought. Those in support of Dreyfuss tended to buy Le Volo, while their enemies favored L'Auto, with the former printed on cheap and gaudy green-tinted paper and the latter on yellow paper. These dailies taunted each other over Zola's death until, in the spring of the following year, the factions decided to do battle in a protracted bike race they called the Tour de France. With Le Velo and L'Auto in charge of the event, it was the color of the newspapers that gave rise to the yellow jersey accorded the winner and the green jersey sported by the stage winner. Given the socio-political significance of the race, cycling in the right colors all suddenly became a popular way of demonstrating one's stance on Dreyfuss, and partisan cycling clubs blossomed across France. As for Alfred Dreyfuss, he was finally exonerated by a military commission convened on the 12th of July, 1906. However, the old animosities were still afoot in June 1908, when he attended the ceremony to transfer Zola's remains from the cemetery at Montmartre to the Pantheon in Paris's 5th district. Standing outside Zola's mistress, Jeanne Rosarat, who, along with her children by Zola, had been cordially invited by the widow, Dreyfuss became the target of assassination. Pushing through the crowd while shouting anti-Semitic slogans, journalist Louis Gregory fired a couple shots but only managed to hit Dreyfuss in the arm. And just to prove that right-wing lunacy was still prominent in France, his trial only lasted a matter of hours before Gregory, who had fired in front of hundreds of witnesses, was found not guilty on the 11th of September 1908 by a carefully selected judge and jury. On the 12th of July 1935, 29 years after his exoneration, and to the exact hour of that deliberation, Dreyfuss died peacefully in Paris before being laid to rest with military honors normally accorded those well above his then rank of lieutenant colonel. His funeral cortege was allowed to pass through the ranks of officials and dignitaries assembled in the Place de la Concorde for the Bastille Day celebrations as it made its way to Montmartre Cemetery, which was as close to an official apology as Dreyfuss ever got. And the sidebar for this one, J'accuse, splashed across the front page of the left-wing newspaper L'Aurore, dated 13th of January 1898, Émile Zola's open condemnation of the anti-Semitic persecution of Captain Dreyfuss and general corrupt malpractice was aimed at President Félix Faure. Left untitled by Zola, it was the newspaper's editor, Georges Clemenceau, himself later Prime Minister of France, who came up with the snappy headline of J'accuse, an expression which has itself entered the political rhetoric of many nations. Arrested on charges of sedition and put on trial for criminal libel the following month, Zola knew he was facing a long jail term, so he made a dash for the boat train at Paris's Gare du Nord to arrive at London's Victoria Station with nothing but the clothes in which he stood. Standing... Come on, you can say hi to the people, but we're almost done. Standing... Come on. Staying in a series of cheap hotels and relying on the kindness of strangers and supporters, Zola spent several months in London's southeast district of Upper Norwood, not returning to Paris until June 1899, 4 months after the spectacular collapse of the Faure government. All right, baby, you did it.